What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. A little bit of a change of scenery today because we're switching it up a little bit, and I figured since this is the second time I'm doing one of these style projects, I'm gonna do a little vlog and show you guys my process and how I go about doing this. So today we've got a double neck build. I'm very stoked about this one. Before we get into it, any of you guys who are woodworkers out there, be nice. I'm not. I'm a musician and I'm just doing this for fun. And it's probably in certain parts going to turn into a little bit of a Franken guitar, if you will. So, like I said, I'm not trained in woodworking. This is a kit guitar, and so I'm sure some of my methods are going to be very different from what the pros out there are used to. So go easy. I'm doing this for fun and because I want my own signature model for a fraction of the cost that it would cost from some other companies. So this one's from Solo Music Gear. It's a 4-piece front top from the looks of it. 4 different pieces of just solid mahogany. I believe it's CNC cut, and you got some really nice flame in this piece over here. I'm really looking forward to staining that. So already I've done a little bit of modifications to it. So the control cavity here, well, just the cavity here for the switch, I actually lengthened it. As you can see, I kind of made markings where the pick guard goes, and I lengthened it because this kit guitar comes designed to have 1, 2, and 3 switches. But as you know, or as you may know, the Gibson kits only have 2, one here and one here. And so the switches that this kit came with are very different from the upgraded ones, we'll call them that. And so I bought the custom upgraded switches because I want good quality gear in my guitar and parts. So here I had to make it bigger to make room for the, I think it's a 4-pole 3-way selector switch. So it's a custom switch to be able to switch. I forget if this one is between top neck and bottom neck, or if it's neck or bridge, but essentially it's got way more connectors on the end of it because all 4 of these pickups go to this switch. So yeah, I need to make this a little bit wider and deeper, so I did that there. Over here I did the same thing. It came as a circle with that original switch. And I actually just extended it out. If you've seen the inside of Trogley's Guitar Show has a good video on the Jimmy Page double neck where it shows they actually take the pick guard cover off, and it shows that guitar actually has like a slot, a cavity drilled out or cut out all the way down to here. And so we're not quite doing that with this guitar, but still had to lengthen this out a little bit to make room for the length of that 3-way selector switch. And that is going to run then down to our control knobs and our input jack. Another thing with this guitar is the input jack is on the side. I briefly considered putting it on the front, but given the amount of room we have here, like putting the control pot here and then having the input jack there, there's just so little room because they're the full-size pots. I also upgraded the pots compared to what was in the kit. So not doing that and keeping the control or the input jack on the side there. And then that leaves room for wires to be fed through these holes here. And one of them is a ground hole. I believe it's this one for the ground wire to go to the bridge. So yeah, you can see that nice wood grain. There's a little bit of flame in these ones too on the back. A little bit of quilting flame here. This one's just standard mahogany. Overall, it's pretty smooth. And I've got my sandpaper here. 120 grit I'm not going to use for this project. I did for the last one because it was a lot more rough. I'm probably going to start with the 320 here just because it's finishing. It's much finer, and like this one is not super rough. So I'm going to hit the 320 and then not 600. I'm going to do 220 first, and then I'm going to do 320. And then I'll go from there. I'll see how that goes. And then I'm going to have to stain it. So now we've got our necks. We've got the 6-string neck and the 12-string neck. Really nice nut on this guitar. The last one I got was just a black plastic one. I'm still not super stoked about it, but I haven't changed it yet. It's been okay. But this one looks, I can't tell if it's bone or Graphtec. But yeah, good quality, really nice binding near the neck here. And these necks are incredibly smooth, so I'm only going to hit them with the 320 just to prep the wood for the stain. And same thing with this 12 string neck. You can see you've got all the grooves in there for your 12 strings, obviously, that are going in. Again, very nice nut, very nice binding. The rosewood fingerboards on these are really, really nice too. Nicer than I was expecting. And much nicer than what came on my other kit guitar too. So I was really happy to see that. And then of course on the back of the neck, it's, from the looks of it, it's just a 2-piece rather than a 3-piece. Another difference from my other guitar. So you can see the join there. Obviously a really long headstock. You don't want to drop that. But there's seemingly no join piece here. So I was happy to see that. Just a 2-piece neck. Maybe that's a join piece there, or maybe I'm just seeing things, but it looks like a 2-piece neck, and I think the 6th string is the same. You've got the join there, and it's all smooth there. So bolt-on necks, of course, with this kit. I prefer the bolt-on necks. If you screw up any of the setup stuff and like the neck angle, if you need to shim underneath, you get a second chance. Whereas with the glue-on necks, it's a one and done pretty much. So yeah, that's what we have so far. And yeah, I've only done the little bit of cutting out in here and cutting out in here to get this project started. So I'm going to sand it down and prep it for staining, and then we're going to stain it brown to accentuate this wood grain, and then sand that back down, and then we'll start on the blue. Okay, so we've sanded down. I only had to use the 220 and 320 as I had expected. So 220 grit started it off a little bit more coarse. The 320, I had a piece where I was able to use one of these sides. It still had good stuff. So 220 and 320, sanded down the body with the 220 and the 320, and now it's nice and smooth, ready for stain. And then for the necks, I only used the 320 because, like I said, they were already pretty smooth. Got a little bit of dust everywhere now, but that's okay. Nothing that can't be wiped down with a little bit of water and a cloth. So I'm gonna stain everything brown now, and then let that soak in, dry, just to pop out this wood grain. And what that's also gonna do is it's gonna lift the grain a little bit as well. So any of the grain that lifts, we'll be able to sand that out with the stain. And then yeah, we'll have a bit of a grain pop, and then we can start on the blue. So just about ready to begin staining brown. Everything's all cleaned off. I gave it a good wipe down, and I taped off the necks so that the binding is protected from the stain. Obviously we don't want the brown getting on the binding, and that tape will stay there for the blue as well. For the stain here, the brown, I'm using the Varathane penetrating wood stain. It's just a stain. There's no finish in this. It's just the brand Varathane. It's not actually a finisher. It's just a dark walnut wood stain. So we're going to use this. We're going to put that in there, rub it all in, make the grain pop, and then sand it back down so that it's similar to this color, but the grain will be more popped. So the body is drying. It's been a few hours, several hours actually, since I put that brown coat on, and I did the back of the necks as well. These were much thinner coats. This was a little bit hasty, if you will, with the first coat. So I'm only gonna do one coat because it's pretty dark, and I don't think it needs to be darker than that. It's just to get into the grain. And because I used these brushes to, as you can see, it was way overloaded. Because I used those brushes, it didn't, it doesn't let you control the amount of stain that goes on as much as like a rag would. So in the time that it was drying, I went out and I bought some rags from Canadian Tire, which is, for those of you who are Canadian, you're familiar. If not, it's like a auto repair or just general repair shops, but Canadian Tire being the name of it, they specialize in auto parts and tires and stuff. So yeah, I got some shop rags from there, and I'm going to be using these to apply the rest of the stain from here on out, including the blue. I got 3 pounds of them, so plenty to go around. And I'm going to do the front with rag when I do the brown here. So yeah, just a little update on that. Don't use sponge brushes, use rags. Okay, so I forgot to time lapse this staining the front, but I stained the front here. And I also touched up the necks. I wiped them down just for any excess, and I stained the front of the headstock along with all the way down to here now. And so essentially the goal with this is, let me pick this up here. If you see on the back now, there's some good lighting, you can see the grain is like almost a black now, which is exactly what we're going for. And so when I sand this all back, this walnut brown color almost is gonna disappear and leave that regular mahogany wood looking again. But then we're gonna be left with, hopefully, most of this nice black grain in the wood. And so that's the whole point of staining this brown first. And to a lesser extent in the necks, but you can still kind of see it in there. Accentuating, and that stuff won't be seen as much, but especially on the front of the guitar, you really want all that nice dark grain so that when you put your dye or your stain on, that's going to still shine through and won't get lost, and then it just looks like a painted guitar. Something I did with my first builds where, you know, I just wasn't doing everything the same way that I'm going to be doing this project, and it ended up being like, I still did this brown part, but I did the dye differently than I plan on this time. And it ended up being so dark that you couldn't end up seeing the grain unless you were up close anyways. So, and then that means a lot of people just think the guitar is painted. So that's not what we're going for. Especially with this figure right here, that's gonna look really nice with that blue, especially when it's done better than the first time around. So yeah, that's the progress for tonight. I'm going to leave it overnight to dry. It's dry to the touch, but I have to sand it all down now with an orbital sander. So I'm gonna leave it, just let it soak in overnight. And then I'll revisit this tomorrow and sand it down. And then hopefully start staining the dark blue, the royal blue. Stunning stains from, who's this from? This is from the UK. Yeah, Crimson Guitars. So looking forward to this tomorrow. Okay, so update on the guitar. This is after basically a full day of letting it sit and the stain to dry. This morning I actually went and put another light coat of brown on the front here, just because it wasn't sitting as dark as the back, just because I put it on lighter and I wasn't using these sponge brushes, which you can see how much this one actually soaked up. Pretty crazy. So I moved to rags instead, and they work much better. So I put a second one on this morning, let it dry for the day. I didn't do any sanding because it was quite windy outside and I didn't want to get all the sand blown around or sawdust blown around. But I am actually going to try and hand sand it this evening. And on the back you can actually see I did a little patch there with 220 grit, and so it started to bring the color back through. or the original color of the wood back through. So I think I'm gonna try and go with that and see how far it takes me. But if it doesn't get all the brown out, then I will have to use the electric sander. But I believe it will get me where I need to go. And the main goal here is just to keep this nice dark grain and then get rid of the brown so that the dark will shine through once I stain it blue. So I wasn't loving the 220, so I ended up going actually to thicker 120 grit just to get more of the color out. And I decided I'm gonna do this with hand sanders. You just get a lot more control. It's not pulling you all over the place. And especially with these edges here, you really don't want to overdo those because then all of a sudden your edge is uneven. Same with here and here. There are still a little bit of dark spots on the edge, but I'm not too concerned with that. It kind of gives it character. But the biggest parts that I was concerned about, I managed to get out with the 120. So I did 120 in the back after doing a little bit of 220 and managed to get it down. Here's what it looked like before. Here's what it looks like now. And so you see it's kind of got that original wood color, mahogany color to it, but the grain in it pops so much more. So I'm going to do the sides and the front the same way, just 120 grit. And I'm going to have to sand it all back to a smoother finish after that. And then we'll work on the necks. Who are next? Okay, so the body is sanded down now. I'm happy with that. And I managed to get almost all the dark spots out, if not all of them. On the edges, I mean. The dark in the grain, you can see how much darker that is now compared to what it was before. And I will just flip it on its side here. On the back, you can see the back too, that really nice dark wood grain with the original mahogany color. So now I sand down the necks, and I'm gonna sand this one down to a finer grit, and then I'll go back to the necks and sand them down and then do the same thing. So yeah. So I finished up for the night. I sanded them all down to 320 grit, and I actually ended up rubbing some water on them with a wet rag just to raise up that grain a little bit. And then tomorrow, once I get around to working on it again, I'm going to sand it down with 320 just to knock off that grain. And then hopefully, because it's a water-based stain, hopefully it won't rise up as much when I apply this stuff tomorrow. So yeah, tomorrow we're gonna sand it down and then start on the blue stain and see if the grain will cooperate. If not, then we'll have to smooth it out as we go, but I think it's going well so far. So sand it down, you can see the grain is that much more accentuated, and hopefully it will translate through to popping through more when we get the stain on it. So yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, good morning guys. It's the next day here. I actually just finished sanding back the wood grain that popped from that water I put on it. So I used the 320 grit here, just nothing crazy, just to get it smooth again. And you could really feel that wood grain coming through. And so I sanded it all back on both the necks and the guitar body, front, back, and all sides. Still looking phenomenal with that wood grain there. I'm very happy with that. The back is more pronounced than the front, but the front's looking pretty good too. So yeah, the next thing to do is we're gonna start with the stain, and I'm gonna start on the back of the guitar, and I'll flip this over right now so that I don't forget, because sometimes the goldfish memory takes over. But yeah, stunning stains from Crimson Guitars. I'm not really sure how many coats I'm gonna do with this. I don't want to do too many, because if I do, it hides entirely the grain and then the guitar just looks painted. So it's not the point, but I also still want to get that nice royal blue shade to it. So yeah, I guess we'll have a crack at it and see how it goes. So first coat of stain is on. Looking not too bad so far. So what I did was I went in and I did my first round of stain with this one. And then I went over it with a dry rag just to get off any excess, because obviously we don't want it soaking in too much. The edge here is a little bit dark, but I can sort that out later. And then I went in, because it's a water-based stain, I went in with a little bit of water on a rag and just kind of, just a little bit. You don't need to flood it, because then it's going to just take all the color off. But I went in and moved it around, and that moves the color around as well, just to try and even it out a little bit. And then yeah, I'm going to wait for this to dry and then work on my second coat. Now, if you're not using water-based stains, if you're using like a leather stain or something, you can use acetone. It does the same thing as water for water-based stains. So yeah, on to the next coat. Okay, so this is after the second coat. You can really start to see this figuring now, which is very, very nice. So I think I'm only gonna need about one more coat for the backside here. So that'll be 3 coats total, because I don't want to go too dark and then hide out all this figuring and the grain. You can see it really nicely. So, but obviously like here it's a little thin for my liking. There's still a little too much wood color shining through, so I'm gonna make it a little bit darker, just to hopefully cover that up a little bit more. But overall, very, very happy with this so far. And same method the second time around. Straight dye, then a dry cloth to get off the excess, then a little bit of water on that one, just to smooth it around, make sure it's even. And as you can see, there's really no blotchiness in there. It's just spread around real nice. So very, very happy with how this is turning out. So I forgot the time lapse for the third coat, but I just finished it and it's looking very nice, and I'm quite happy with that. So I think I will stop there, because I don't want this grain to disappear. So what I will do next is I'm going to take some green Scotch-Brite, which is equivalent to about 600 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to lightly go over the top. And what that will do is, to my research, is it will bring out the color even more and just really accentuate all this grain here. So I'm going to try that out. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work, I just do another coat it back over, but I think it's going to do some wonders for this. So I'll see you then. Okay, so the Scotch-Brite did work pretty well for the most case. I got a little too carried away with some areas here, so I ended up going over just with the rag that I was using for the dye. I didn't put any new stuff on, I just went over everything again with it after I used the Scotch-Brite. And as you can see around the edges here, I managed to get the majority of those dark areas out with the Scotch-Brite, which is really nice. So if you have unevenness with your dye, it'll have rings and dark patches. This side was a little harder just because this guy's being difficult, but for the most part, I managed to get it pretty continuous. And yeah, I'm quite happy with that. And it's a really, really nice royal blue, and that's dry. So when it's wet, it'll be flaming a lot more than this, or when there's a finishing seal on it. So very happy with that. Gonna move on to the sides now. Okay, so the sides have been stained, 3 coats on. They're looking pretty good. There's some darker blotches here and there. It's interesting the way the wood is taking it up, the stain or the dye on the side. A little bit differently than the back, but that's okay. I'm gonna wait for it to dry, and then I'm gonna go in there with the Scotch-Brite, and that should even it up a little bit. And I might put, a little bit more here and there as needed. But yeah, I'm gonna wait for it to dry, similar to the back, and then in the meantime, I'm gonna get to work on the neck, or both necks, and then we'll go from there. The sides being done now, and then one of the 2 necks is done. I'm gonna get started on the front. Same process, gonna do 3 coats, stain, dry wipe, and then a water wipe in between each stain coat. But this one should look good. Okay, so I finished the front coats here, looking very, very nice. Especially the figure in here, I love that. That's gonna look so sick when it's done. Still a bit wet, but over in this corner, it's a bit lighter here because it's darker on the edges. So I'm gonna wait for it to dry off a little bit. And then I'm gonna take some of my Scotch-Brite to it and see what I can do there, just to even out the color change, the color shift a little more. These ones actually turned out really nice. Just a little bit of dark there that I'm gonna try and take out of the edge. It's nothing terrible though, so just some really light passes with the Scotch-Brite once it dries, and then I think we're good for the front. Very happy with that. Okay, so now that the staining is all done on the first neck and the guitar body, I had to figure out, so I bought these Grover Deluxe tuners, and the problem is with this neck, they're ever so slightly closer than the 6-string, and so they weren't exactly fitting. So what I did was I took some 120 grit sandpaper and I just sanded down the spikes on these tuners so that they could fit in there just enough. So I don't know if you can see, it's just ever so slightly sanded down. Doesn't hurt anything, no harm, no foul. Worst case scenario, you gotta buy a new set, but I figured it's not much. I don't think it's done anything to it negatively, so yeah, just sanded it down a bit. They fit, so I gotta do that times 12, and then I can get to work on staining this neck, and then that'll be it for staining. Okay, so I sanded down all the here they are, all the Grover tuners. I don't know if you can really see, but the pointy bits right in there, I just sanded them down and drilled all the holes that go on the neck, because the ones that come with it go right here. So they're not perfectly straight, but like with each other, but they fit and they look straight when they're on. So that's the important part. Tomorrow I will stain this neck to make it look like these guys. This guy is nice and blue, well, obviously, but it's dry now, and tomorrow we'll be sealing it, so we'll see you then. Okay, so both necks are now stained. Again, the grain didn't totally take it up evenly, and even trying to spread it around with a dry rag using a bit of water, like the water was just taking it off. So I don't know if it's like a difference between, like you can really see there, I don't know if it's a difference between like water stain and versus oil stain. I have no experience with oil stain, so I don't know, but it's okay. It gives a character. I don't really mind. I'm not looking for the perfect finish here, but yeah, just thought I'd mention that. It didn't really take it up evenly. It could even just be the cut of wood or how they prepared the wood before they threw it in the CNC or whatever to get all this stuff done. But yeah, I'm gonna do my first coat of Varathane finish. So here I've got a Varathane water-based wood finish, and so I used this on my other guitar, but I only did like 3 coats, I believe. So I'm gonna try and do more with this one just because I want more of a gloss finish. And I'm also going to pick up some spray-on varathane, just because for the necks, last time the spread on with a sponge brush, it was wiping all the stain off the neck, and I wonder if maybe it's because they're both water-based. For the guitar, it wasn't a problem, so I'm going to do that here. But the necks, and for other reasons too, I'm going to do the first couple coats on the necks with spray and then finish it off with this guy. So yeah, onwards to curing this, or finishing this guy, putting a coat of finish on it. Okay, so first coat of clear coat is done here. I actually watched back that time-lapse video and saw that this half of the guitar got a little bit shafted in terms of how much finish was there. So I went over with a little bit more and just made sure that this side had just as much as this side. But already you can see that that flame is just shining through. This is just one coat of finish, and I'm pretty stoked about that. You can see how much, even here, all that figure. So yeah, one coat, it's darkening up a little bit, which is nice. It's exactly what I'm going for. So yeah, we gotta wait 2 hours. I'm gonna go out and get some spray and just wait for this to cure before I do the next coat. And I'm only doing the back for now because I don't want to like smudge it into the cardboard or whatever, or even the sides. I don't want it dripping or anything like that. So really taking my time with this. Patience is key. And yeah, I want it to turn out as good as it possibly can. So off to get that spray, and I'll pick back up when it's time to do the next coat. So I just put the second coat of gloss on here, and actually with the help of my dad, rigged up a little hanging system so that I can do all sides at once rather than having to do one at a time. Also put up a brighter light so you can see it's looking real nice under that light. Yeah, not a super deep blue, but again, like compared to my last project, I really wasn't going for a super deep. I really wanted the grain to shine through this time, and that's what we're seeing so far. So just second coat on the back, and then I'm gonna work my way around and do a first coat on the front and on the sides. So enjoy. Okay, so we got our first coat of finish done, if this thing will focus here. First coat of finish done on the front, and as you can see, that really nice wood grain is coming out. So very happy with that. Sides are also coated up here. First coat, and then second coat on the back, which is also looking very nice. And now we have to let it sit for 2 hours to dry. So second coat on the back done, first on the front and sides is done, and it's coming along very nicely. Okay, so this is on the front here, 4 coats in of clear coat, which is looking real nice. I did notice though, to the touch, there was grain rise, and so what happened is over the coats, um, it just keeps coating over that grain rise, and so now that I've got a pretty significant base of coat on this guitar, I'm gonna go in there with 320 sandpaper and just very, very, very lightly give that a quick sand. And I'm actually gonna start with the back because I don't want to end up screwing it up on the front, and then, you know, that's for everyone to see. If it's on the back, it's a little easier to recover. But yeah, it's looking really, really nice. And I'm just going to give it a really light sand with 320 grit before the next coat here. The back actually has 5 coats on it because I had started with this. So it's got a little bit more than the rest of the guitar, but so far so good. The sides are feeling very nice and smooth, so I'm not going to have to sand those. I did hit them with a little bit of 600 grit this morning just because there were some rough patches, especially up here and up here. So yeah, I hit those with 600 grit and put another coat over top, and they're perfectly smoothed out now. So my hope is that the raised grain here, 320 will take it down, and then we'll do another few coats and then see where that leaves us. Okay, so I just put another coat on the guitar, and as some of you may know, with the SG that I built, I've got this flame tortoise pickguard on there, and I was able to buy that just from Amazon when I got that guitar. But of course, with the double necks, they don't make those. They don't come prepared. So I ordered a sheet from Amazon, just a plain sheet of it, and I'm going to be tracing around the pick guards that came in the kit, and then I'll be cutting those out. So yeah, just wanted to do a little section on that. Okay, so I've started putting some finish on these headstocks and necks. So far, only the headstocks. And I'm doing it that way just because when I did my last guitar, when I rubbed on the finish, it actually smeared the stain around, and I didn't want to take that chance with these guys. So I bought a can of the same stuff, just in a spray can, an aerosol. And so I'm starting on the flat surfaces first. I had a little bit of acrylic paint that I did on the headstock, on each headstock, and so I'm doing a couple of mist coats just to make sure that it shouldn't run, but I'm just making sure that I do a few of those first to make sure it doesn't run. And of course, having these elevated on each end keeps these flat to prevent any dripping as well. So I'm going to really seal up the headstock first with a few coats of the spray, and then I'll do the rest of the neck afterwards when I can have them laying flat. So yeah, just a little update on the necks. I'm about 16 coats into the body right now, and it's coming along nicely, but it's taking its time to get all the grain rays out of the finish. So in between coats, I'm having to sand with 320 and then 600 grit and then put another coat. But it's slowly but surely getting more and more smooth. So yeah, just got to keep going with that. Okay, so I'm just about to put the final coat on this guy, and it's looking really good. Very happy. I managed to get most of the lines that were in it out, which is nice. The leftovers are like little mini brush strokes. You can hardly even feel them, but when you shine a really bright light on them like I am here, you can kind of see them. And so I'm not sure if those will go away. I'm going to try sanding it with like a brown paper bag, see if that'll help it a little bit. but I'm wondering if maybe just the buffing process is what will kind of bring out the shine and get rid of any of that last little bit of residual bumpiness. But if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. I don't really mind. It's not going to be very often that there's going to be a really bright light shining on it. So more often than not, it'll be in the dark with colored lights on it. So yeah, about to put the final coat. Give or take 30 coats. The back, I'm doing. This will be the 31st coat on the back, just because on this side here, it was a little bit more bumpy and was fighting me more to kind of smooth out that grain. And on the front, this will be the 29th coat. So, and I thought the front might need more as well, but where it was bumping up right here, it actually smoothed out pretty quick. So yeah, give or take 30 coats for the body, and it's come along real nice. And I think it could have been less if I had sanded earlier on. That was, from what I was researching here, that was kind of my flaw, is I started sanding a bit too late, and so the finish had kind of sealed in the wood, which had raised the grain. And then you're battling the finish to knock that down and get that smooth. So yeah, just some food for thought. I actually ended up doing that correctly with the necks here. You can see they're so nicely shined and smooth, and this is only 15, or this will be my 15th coat on these necks here. And I've done the back, the headstock, and the sides, and I'm saving the front because I didn't want anything dripping off. But the first 5 or so coats were with this aerosol spray. It's the same stuff, just in a can, water-based polyurethane. And that was just so that it could, one, set in the marker here, or the paint, and then 2, not smear around the stain or the dye, because that was a problem, as I mentioned earlier, that I ran into with my first SG, is that as soon as I started applying with this stuff with a brush, it started smearing the dye all over the place, even after a day's worth of drying. And I don't know if that was some sort of like coating that the company had put on the neck. Maybe they hadn't anticipated, but I had even sanded the neck down, and it still was kind of resistant to the stain, and it was smeared it around. So long story short, aerosol can, spray on like 5 mist coats, and then from then on I've been brushing it on with the brush stuff. So yeah, coming along very nicely. One more coat for the back of these because I don't want to build them up too high. Otherwise, I'm going to have a big ridge between the finish and where my binding is for the fretboard. So I don't want that. I imagine I'll still have to do a little bit of light sanding to get that smooth with the tape being there, but I'm not too worried. And then I'm going to do the fronts of the headstocks next. So one thing I'd actually forgotten to mention with the necks is, if you're doing a kit yourself, be very careful not to do what I did, and don't go down past like the heel here with your finish. And so what happened on both of them is I actually went in and did like 10-ish coats of finish, and then had to think about it. I was like, well, this is adding layers to it, making it bigger than it originally was. And so it's probably not going to fit in the cavity of the guitar body now. And so I tried, and sure enough, it was too big. So I had to sand it all back. So when you're finishing, if you do your own, only come down to here. And I'm a little bit worried it may stick out a little bit and may look bad, but I can assess that when I get there. But if you do the whole thing, it's not going to fit. Yeah, it's just not going to do well. And on the guitar itself, I left the cavities them just the way they came, so nothing changed there. But yeah, if you put finish on that, it's going to expand and make it bigger, and it will not fit in your neck slot cavity. Okay, so the body's been drying for about almost 4 days now, just letting it cure. And I actually took it in a room yesterday inside the house and let it just sit in there, because I watched a video where someone who was using polyurethane finish said that if you take it in a room and you can no longer smell it, it's cured enough to be buffing it because all the gases have released out of it. Now, if you can still smell it, it means there's still gases releasing and you shouldn't be doing anything to it. So tomorrow, planning on buffing this, and the necks, I'm still going to let them cure for another couple days. But I wanted to take the tape off to let that cure, because I also want to smooth out. There's a bit of a ridge where the finish meets the binding here. So I want to smooth that out, but I just got to do a little bit more research on how to do that effectively without damaging stuff. But I did realize when I said to sand down or don't stain all the way on the side, I realized I screwed up. So maybe measure that out. What I'm going to do to rectify this situation here is I'm just going to take a really thin paintbrush and just go in there and try and cover this area with just one layer of finish. Like, I don't want too much, but I just don't want it looking dull like that. And I'll do that on each of the necks on both sides. But yeah, just to take away that dull look and make it look finished rather than still a work in progress. So yeah, just thought I'd update that. Okay, so I'm at the sanding stage now. I've actually already sanded this neck. You can kind of tell it's a little bit dull there, but I've completely sanded down that ridge. I'm using 600 grit, the leftover from the block that I was using to wet sand between coats, just the edges, just to make use of every last little bit. And the edges on the 6-string neck here are smooth on both sides. And I also managed to get all that gunk off the fretboard too, or the binding, which was really nice. I've got, you can see in there, I did a little bit of finish around where the neck sticks out. And it went in a little bit there just to make it look finished. It's not many layers, but I just wanted it to look finished and not like dull like the rest of it. So I did with a little paintbrush, as I said, just this guy right here. I went in with a little bit of finish and just put on a thin coat. So I've still got to sand down this neck. You can see there's still gunk there from the tape, and in there too, plenty of it. So yeah, one more neck to go, and then we're into the buffing phase. Okay, so we're done polishing the body. Initially I had my dad helping out a little bit, and then he kind of helped out with the camera. And what we discovered is that, and here's the back now, it's looking very nice, a nice mirror finish. You can see that reflection. It's very nice, but it wasn't initially like that. So initially we were using this stuff, which I'm sure works great on cars and stuff, but you know, based on videos I watched, automobile cutting compound was supposed to be good. It wasn't. So if you're building a guitar, don't use this on a guitar. It dulls it and it makes it like a satin finish, and I had to get in there with soap and water, like Dawn dish soap and water, to get it off, and it was still dull. But then this came to the rescue, new finish. And it's just a polish, so it's not a cutting compound, and you apply it by hand. So you probably saw putting it on with this sponge. You let it haze and then you wipe it off with a microfiber. And as you could see, it brought the shine back to the body. And I actually took a picture of the body before we brought the shine back, and it was pretty dull. I'll leave that in the video as well, but now it looks very nice. So if you don't have to, don't use a cutting compound when you're using, I don't know if it's user error, it probably very well could be, or if it's the type of finish that I have, the water-based poly. But yeah, this new finish, just a polish, shines it up real nice, gets a nice coat on it so it's nice and smooth, and then there's no need for electric tools and buffing and stuff. So yeah, on to the next. Okay, so this is the wiring diagram I've been using for this. Up here, it's black wire underneath. So this position I believe is up, and this position I believe is down. So I kind of had that confused initially. So just make sure you're careful with that. So white, red. So if the switch is like this on the back of the faceplate, the white is on top, the red is on bottom. That's how the switch has to be wired. And then the black is up top where they're actually, you can see here, it's jumpered. That's the term I was looking for. So the top two are jumpered. The bottom two are red, white. Red on the bottom, white on the top. If the faceplate is looking at you like this. Trogley's Guitar Show has a really good video where they open up the Jimmy Page double neck, and it shows you exactly that. So the black wire goes to the jumper, and then there should be a ground on the switch closest to you when it's upside down. So the ground goes through, that all gets wired. Your white goes into here, your red goes into here. This is your rhythm volume, your treble volume. Now, this schematic there, I did run into some issues with it. It may just be I interpreted it wrong. And I've been tackling this with my dad, who's got some experience in electronics, and we've both been trying to wrap our heads around it and just very confused as to what to do. So first of all, so there's a jumper between 4 and 5 here, this guy and this guy. And then there's a jumper between 2 and 7. And so if we come over here to my switch, we'll see 4 and 5, 2 and 7. So all the top ones, the top middle two are jumpered, the top end ones are jumpered. Now, here's where it gets weird. Depending on how you interpret this switch, whether the 2, 4, and 5 and 7 are on the top or on the bottom will determine where these wires go. And so again, when my dad and I had a crack at this, we interpreted it wrong and had them swapped. And so when you swap these, what it'll actually do is when this is down, it'll be your 12-string neck when it's supposed to be up, and when it's up, it'll be your bottom neck. So that's not what you want. So I ended up switching these from what they were. So let's see how we had it. The rhythm ended up going on the okay, what's jumpered? Rhythm ended up going on the 4 and 5 jumpered. It doesn't matter because they're jumpered. But then the treble ended up going on the 7 instead of the 4 and 5, and that fixed my switch issue here. Now when it's up, it's your 12-string neck, which is right here, and when it's down, it's your 6-string, how it's supposed to be. So that was something there that I ran into. Okay, so for the pickups here, these are the 12-string pickups. Now it says to wire the treble pickup to this right here, which is our number 5. So the second peg in on the bottom. And then it's set to wire the rhythm pickup here to number 7, which is the outermost peg on the bottom. So if you look at it this way, it's set to wire it here and then on the outside here. And what that does is when the switch is in the down position, both bloody pickups are on at the same time. So obviously that's not right, and both my dad and I recognize that in this drawing, taking the time we did to study it. And we're both like, okay, well, what's going on here? So we actually got all this stuff wired up, and I experimented with the pickup. I put it on here to be opposite of this side, and it didn't work with the neck selector. So then I tried it on here, number 3, so the second most on the other side, and it did work. And so now, if you can see, here's my neck pickup, so that when it's in the up position, then this one's connected, meaning this neck pickup is on, and vice versa when it's down, and I'm not going to try and do that now with one hand, then this one is on. So these in the middle two are my 12-string neck, or my 12-string pickups for my 12-string neck, and when this switches up, it will work, and I just tried that. Oh, and to test this, I'm using my little Yamaha amp here. I just plug the guitar in, and then if everyone's got a cell phone, you're probably watching this on a cell phone. Play some music from your cell phone in over top the pickup, and it'll pick it up. It'll pick up the sound. And same here, and just play with the switches. Make sure everything's working as it should if you're building yourself. Yeah, don't put all the necks on and all the strings and then try it and realize everything's wrong, because then you've got that much more work to do for yourself. So another thing I wanted to mention, when you're testing this stuff, you have to make sure that, one, all these are grounded already in the pots. So I made sure, like, my dad and I actually did the wiring in here. I've kind of taken over now with the switch, just because I've learned a bit from it and learned a bit more about a soldering iron and how to use it. And so I've taken over on this switch. But make sure everything's grounded in here, and everything from here, the ground comes all the way down to here, and it gets grounded to here. And then you ground the wires that come from here to your jumper parts. And then when you go to test it, you have to make sure that the mesh of all these cables is touching, because then they're grounded. And if you see the Trogley's guitar video that I mentioned earlier, they will open this up just very slightly, and not enough to see what goes where, but every one of these braided wires is all tied together and then grounded with solder, and then there's a ground wire going to the middle of this switch, followed by ground wires going out of here to each of the bridges or the tail pieces, whatever. It all grounds itself once it's together. But yes, make sure that these guys, when you're testing, are touching each other so that they're grounded. Otherwise, you don't get signal. And that's what I initially ran into, was no signal at all until I touched these guys, and then they're grounded, and then you get signal. Okay, so the wiring is entirely finished now. All of these pots are wired, the pickups are all wired, and I'll bring this here one more time just to kind of summarize what was done. So as I showed before, this guy, instead of the rhythm on the 12-string neck, instead of going to the 7, ended up going to 3, as seen by the number 3 here. Treble pickup went where it said it was going to go, to number 5, second in on the bottom. And then up here, the rhythm pickup went where it said it was going to go. This is a 6-string neck, it went to number 1. And then the treble pickup, instead of going to number, 3, where it said it was going to go, ended up going to number 7. So position 1, position 7, and then position 3 and position 5. So if you think about it, the 12-string neck is on the inner 2, and the 6-string neck is on the outer 2. And one position is neck, the other position is bridge, and that's how we figured that out. So yeah, the back is all wired now. Those are in. Another thing that ended up happening is, even though we had it all taped off and everything, there's an exhaust port on this this soldering iron. You can see it right there, the exhaust port. And when we were soldering it, this pot specifically, it kind of shot at the tape a little bit and burnt the tape, which we thought we were in the clear of. But it ended up going through and yellowing the urethane a little bit, so I had to go in and sand it down, apply a little bit of blue stain. It's not perfect, but it does, and it is pretty unnoticeable. So you just threw the plate in there. It just kind of, it's on the back of the guitar too, so you won't see much of it. And on the front of the guitar, the wiring here is done as well. So you can see this actually was quite nice, this extra hole that they had drilled for the switch, because for extra wires, it's nice to just have that sat in there. And then they're all run in here. They're grounded to each other here, and the ground wire is coming off of the bottom middle one on this switch to here. And then there is a ground wire running from here into this bridge pole, and then a ground wire from this bridge pole to the top of one of this closest pot here, which is also grounded. So everything is grounded, and then once the strings are on, it'll ground this, and it'll ground the tuning machines up near the top of the neck as well. So everything will be grounded, which is nice. So hopefully good signal and no noise, which would be very nice. But yeah, so everything's wired up. I'm just going to start putting things together now. So all the parts are on the front, and I had the case on the back, or the plate, cover plate. Had to adjust the size of this here just so it would fit in between a little bit. But other than that, everything went in, no problems. Switches move, no problems. And our volume and tone knobs are all good here too. So body's done, onwards to the neck. Okay, so I've gotten to the stringing part of this here, and just an interesting point that I wanted to bring up, and I didn't catch this first part on video because I knew it was going to be a bit of a back and forth and a hassle, just to try and figure out what it needed. So I strung up the E string and the octaves, and I had the bridge at the lowest height, just because that's the lowest it can absolutely go, so that I can know what I'm working with. So it was at the lowest height here, and then the truss rod was also at an arc, or I don't know what it's technically called, but it goes like this, like down and up rather than more up and down. So the truss rod essentially had the neck as far away from the strings it could be as well. And that's how it came. So I strung up these strings, got them to pitch, and then and it's still buzzing a little bit, but I adjusted the truss rod to bring the action, or the neck, closer to the strings, and thus the action down. But then there was too much fret buzz down here when this action was good. And then I tried lifting this up, and it made this action higher while this was still pretty low. And so what that told me was the neck angle needed to come up a little bit. So what I did was I took the neck off, and I took some cardboard. It can be cracker box cardboard. In this case, it's an NHL Kleenex box. And you know damn well I got the Calgary Flames portion in there. Flames fan for life. But yeah, so I took that and I cut it out to fit like the outline on the bottom of the neck. And it's nice because the corners are kind of rounded as it is, at least on the portion I used. This one's not, but the portion I used, it was rounded, so it did have to work for me. And you just round it off with some scissors, and then I put 2 layers of it in there, because better to have too much than not enough, because you can always raise this bridge up and lower it down. So if this is too close, then you can just raise this up a little bit and it makes it better. So I didn't just really want to take the neck off again. So I put 2 layers in there. That should be plenty, and it is. The action is better. I'm still working out the buzz. I got to watch a couple of videos on how to really set it up, or maybe ask one of my buddies who knows a bit more about guitar setup. And yeah, so I'm going to do the same thing for this neck. Really hoping that this one doesn't have to come off, because there's a very thin layer, because the grain goes this way, a very thin layer of the wood. When this neck came out the first time, it pulled up just the topmost layer of the wood, and so there's a split there, and I'm worried that when I have to take this neck out, that split is going to come off entirely. I mean, I guess I could wood glue it back on, but this one kind of was not the most convenient. So yeah, I'll do the same with this neck, and I'll check back in shortly. Okay, so aside from a little bit of lettuce chopping needing to be done up there, the 12-string side is done. Sounds really cool. And with all the strings on it, the action is actually quite nice, and there's no more buzzing. So I'm going to follow suit with this 6-string neck, see if I can get all the strings on there, get the tension evened up, and then I'll go from there in terms of what I need to adjust. That was something I noticed in a setup video I watched. I probably should have done that beforehand, but here we are. So yeah, very stoked so far. So good. Okay, so the guitar is entirely strung up now. The 12-string, as I said, is pretty much perfectly set up. I really like the way it plays. I'm not going to do any more there. The 6-string, on the other hand, is a bit of a different story. And so for now, I'm going to have to just deal with it as it is. For the most part, it plays very nicely from the 2nd fret all the way up. But the 1st fret, unfortunately, this nut here is cut like way too high. And maybe I'll go back, but you can kind of see it here. It's kind of considerably higher than everything else, than all these frets here. And so I'm going to have to get a set of nut files and just file down each of these individual slots, because otherwise it's like that, and like it just doesn't really make a sound because it's not low enough and it's not making that proper connection. So for now, I'll make do with it as is, but I'm going to order that set of nut files and yeah, go from there. So yeah, very happy with the way this turned out. I'm gonna put the tenon covers, or not tenon covers, the truss rod covers over here. Tenon covers normally go down here on SGs, but that's not what this is. So truss rod covers are gonna go on, and then yeah, that's pretty much finished project. So thank you guys for following along, and I hope this was an entertaining video, and hopefully for some of you, if you're using it to follow along, it's insightful as well, especially in that wiring part, because that is something that I know a lot of people question online in forums and also on YouTube. So cheers, guys.